Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Jenn Gustetic, Director of Early Stage Partnerships at NASA. Jenn, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Thank you, Nicola, for convening this series of discussions. I have been at NASA for almost 10 years in a few different roles. I started off as the first Prizes and Challenges program executive for NASA, founded the Asteroid Grand Challenge to find all asteroid threats to human populations and know what to do about them. But I am someone that is incredibly passionate about technology, public-private partnerships, and working across sectors and disciplines in order to find new ways to approach old problems that have public value. So you see SBIR and STTR, the Small Business Innovation Research Program at NASA, and then the Small Business Technology Transfer Program at NASA. And these two programs are tasked with furthering research and technology development. What we do is we partner with small businesses, and we consider those to be firms that are less than 500 employees. But the dramatic majority of the amount of investments that we make are much smaller size companies, less than 25 employees. In the STTR portion of the program, we not only invest in small businesses and entrepreneurs, but through STTR, we try to encourage university partnerships. And so that's an important program for actually spinning out innovations from the lab and from scientific advancements and research advancements in the lab into the marketplace through these small business partnerships. And we deploy annually, every year, around $200 million of capital. Annually. The US federal government overall invests over $3 billion every year through SBIR and STTR programs at 10 different agencies. By law, we have a phase one, which is what we consider the idea phase, where we're investing in those 125K initial investments. And phase two, the only people that can compete for phase two are people that have been selected for a phase one. At phase two, we tend to focus on the development, demonstration, and delivery of the particular innovation. And those investments are $750,000 for a 2-year period of performance. And ultimately, the goal of our program is to try to help as many of those firms as possible to get to phase three. Phase three means they no longer need our money because other customers are buying from them. And so phase three is technically money that comes from programs other than mine. But frankly, getting to phase three is tough. We find that for every dollar invested by SBIR, over $2 were ultimately invested to the US economy. And over a 10-year period, that investment sees a 19-to-1 return in the economy. And so if you are a small business trying to address a larger market, you have to think beyond NASA as a customer. We're a really good initial customer to push the boundaries of your technology, to get you great technical expertise. If you're trying to think about differentiating us, for example, why would someone come to us for funding? We play a different role in the ecosystem. We do fund riskier technologies than folks might be able to find other deep tech investors that are actually willing to invest. That's number one. But also, it's not just the money. When you go for a NASA or a government SBIR contract, you get access to all sorts of other advantages. And that's not just even association with the NASA brand, which can be hugely valuable in and of itself to show that NASA validated and gave credibility to your idea and to your technology, which can help actually in follow-on funding. But also, we don't take any equity. We actually are seen more as revenue from the vantage point of an investor because we're contracts. We execute through contracts. I encourage folks to do is really get familiar with the technologies and the firms that are in our portfolio from a potential deal, especially from a CVC perspective, from a potential strategic investment deal flow perspective.
Thank you, Jenn. It was really good. And to me, it sounded more like non-dilutive investment. Is it grants or is it equity investments?
That's a great question. So we execute through contracts. If a government agency is making the award through a contract, they're signaling that they are likely a customer of that technology. And they're trying to almost like help that company through baby steps, figure out how to work with the government as a customer. Because when you work with the government as a customer, you're working on a contract. And those are non-trivial mechanisms to figure out your accounting systems, all of that.
I think you're right. It's a very strong positive signal to know this is going to be contracts. And I like the purity of it because I think many corporate VCs are not necessarily very pure. Sometimes they do equity investments and sometimes they do equity investments linked with a contract. Mm-hmm. And I don't actually like when it's combined because it feels like you're saying, oh, I trust you, but at the same time, I want you to do what I think you should be doing. And I feel like when you link the two, this is not very pure. In your case, you'll go very pure on the contract side, which is, this is a signal NASA believe if you were to deliver on this technology, there is a path where NASA could be your customer and an anchor customer and all of that. So I like this purity, and I think it's indeed a very nice signal because it shows you believe in the technology if it can be delivered.
But if you think about the overall portfolio of investments, where should you be taking the most risk in what you invest in? Probably with the small businesses, the most entrepreneurial in their mindset, able to move rapidly and try new things and aren't baked into the established way that the large primes think about innovation. And it's small investments and they're quick. So there is a decently high failure rate on the technologies.
It feels because you're so pre-seed fund stage, it's geek investing in geeks. Mm-hmm. And so one of my questions is going to be about how do you make these investment decisions? What kind of investment committee do you have? What level of maturity is necessary for your pre-seed investment from NASA to happen?
Yeah, so this is one of those parts when you talked about at the very beginning, Nicolas, some of the constraints that you end up being under as a government program. When we make these investment decisions, we're actually told by Congress the evaluation criteria we have to use, all of us. And one of them is the technical merit and the innovativeness of the idea itself. So is the idea itself truly innovative? One of them is around the team. Is the team qualified to deliver? That doesn't mean that everybody has to have a PhD. That's not what that means. But does the team demonstrate competence in the area that they're proposing to do work? And do they have the right team together? Are they missing a key skill set, for example? Third, around the work plan. So they've told us what they want to do. They've told us who's going to do it. Does their work plan seem viable?
And I think you're saying that there is technical merit, and then you have maturity 1, 2, and 3. So could you give an indication, what is the lowest level of maturity of technology where below that you wouldn't invest, but at that level you would invest?
So at NASA, we have this thing called Technology Readiness Level, TRL, and it goes from 1 to 9. And 1 is literally a concept. And 9 is proven flight hardware that is readily available on the market, that might be 50 years old, but we know it works. And it's flown 1,000 times. So we use that all the time. NASA actually offers programs to help companies also get access to flight testing opportunities, which are sometimes the most expensive and the most difficult opportunities to access. We will fund TRL 1, 2, 3. Typically phase 1s, I'd say, are TRL 1 through 3. And phase 2s can be TRL 2 through 6 if it's software. Sometimes they can blow us out of the park on TRL advancements if it's software.
So really from concept onwards, but really very risky technology or just a concept, and you even have a proof of concept. So I think that's really helpful. When you move to phase 2, do you start to have more latitude about which ones you decide to follow on versus the ones you don't?
Yes. If you get a phase 2 award, there's a ton of opportunities that open up for you. We can execute basically an extension to your phase 2 award to keep it going for up to an additional year, but that requires dollar for dollar matching. So that could be that an investor comes in and matches dollar for dollar. Sometimes we see like the corporates come in, but on the corporate R&D side, or even on the corporate side of things, you can come back to the CCRPP program when your phase 2 is done. And in fact, you could be a phase 2 from any federal agency. It doesn't have to be just us. And come with a matching investor and a understanding of who your customer is and how you're going to use this funding to get to that customer, the last tipping point investment that's needed to de-risk the technology. And we really prioritize that commercialization plan in those investments. Really don't want that to just be additional research and development funding. We really want that to be the final de-risking investment, technology de-risking investment, before that investor or whoever picks it up and continues to take it forward. And we've just recently started doing a second phase 2 award that are really those larger dollar value, up to $5 million investments that accelerate the technology development towards a particular NASA customer as a anchor pilot customer for a critical technology, not just for NASA, but enabling the future space economy. So those ones are the ones that we just made 4 announcements just a few weeks ago, actually. That is another opportunity that happens once you've got a phase 2. But also a really important point that I want to make for you folks that often is underappreciated is that as soon as a small business wins a phase 1, from the perspective of the government marketplace, the government can buy direct from them for that innovation and any innovation derived from that innovation. That's a huge definition. Can buy directly from them without competition forever with no dollar value limit, even if the company is acquired. Typically, you do have to educate the government customer because they won't believe you. The government customer who's not familiar with SBIR will be like, no, I have to compete everything. Actually, not for SBIR. That's one of the things the Congress said to small businesses. If you win a phase 1, you have satisfied competition. You've already competed. It's one of the things that they do to reduce the barriers to entry for small businesses who compete against all of these other big players.
That's a huge deal, actually. This is one of the big golden nuggets from this interview, because you are giving a special weapon to the startup to be able to be extremely quick to win a government contract in the future.
Yep. It's a different sales tactic because in some ways they have to convince the government client, no, you can directly buy from me, but they have a vehicle to do that. They don't have to wait for a competition to come out. But if they have a near-term need and they need it now and you meet their requirement, they can actually go directly to you.
So let me challenge a little. If you get into this program, when you are just at concept level, do you still qualify for the same benefit?
Yeah, but you might have a hard time selling if you don't have a thing.
A few years down the line, they would have a product, they are able to sell, they can benefit from the fact they were selected in the phase 1.
So an example for that, there's this company called NanoRacks that won a single phase 1 award, and it was a long time ago. And it was related to building a capability for deploying small spacecraft off of the International Space Station. And at that time, I think they were only $75,000 awards. So it's not like that award was actually used to actually finally build the capability to get a deployer up on the International Space Station. But that phase 1 award was able to be leveraged to get follow-on agreements with the International Space Station customer to actually develop and get that deployer up on the International Space Station. And today, if you just go do some research on NanoRacks, they actually were a huge part of the small spacecraft renaissance in space before small launch capabilities were available. The only way, in many ways, to get deployed was hitch a ride up to the International Space Station, and then they basically just throw them off the International Space Station through these deployers for you. That's the way they were able to early test some of those small spacecraft capabilities in space. And NanoRacks squeezed all the juice out of that phase 1 that they could in order to get their deployer. They've got a commercial service offering on the International Space Station right now.
I want to go back to the earlier question, which is about, for corporate VCs, you have a fixed size fund and you allocate some of the fund for reserve, which is for follow investments to the companies you invested in the first place. And when I started, I was told, try to plan 40%. And right now, actually, I'm starting to increase it to 50% because of COVID-19. And I feel like I need to be able to help the portfolio companies potentially for longer than initially planned. In your case, you're looking at 20% for this follow. Do you feel like this is enough, or do you feel like if you could increase it, that would be better?
So I am somewhat limited by legal caps. So for example, for the one program I mentioned, the CCRPP program, I can't spend more than 15% of my budget on it by law. CCRPP is 10%, the sequentials is 15%. So even if I did both of those completely at full, it'd be 25. So if I put too much in my post phase 2 investment bucket, I run the risk that I've got not enough high quality projects, especially since we're investing in risky things, to advance. You have to wait some time to see if those hypotheses test out to be correct. But we do have early indications that investing more than we had been previously on the phase twos that need a little bit additional help to cross that valley of death is having initial payoff.
What does US company mean? Does it have to be 100% owned in US or 51%? Does it have to have everyone who are citizens? How do you define this?
Yeah, so that is specifically defined by the SBA, and the law specifies what is considered to be an eligible small business and what the ownership of that small business needs to look like. And ownership is where it can get a little complicated, especially when you look at acquisitions where the parent company owns more than just you. That can get complicated on whether or not you become eligible, not just because of size, the under 500 employees, but also ownership in terms of majority US owned.
Very good. So like VCs and CVCs, you will make a lot of investments, but it takes many years, and probably you even many more years before if it's a big success or not. How do you track success? What kind of KPIs do you use, which could be useful for other CVCs to listen to, because we have the same constraints of not knowing if you have invested in the right company, startup, to be really a big success. So how do you define success initially?
We certainly look to a number of different proxy measures, for example. So what our program is held accountable to reporting up through all the different levels of government to say, how successful are we being? We set a goal for ourselves annually in how many specific technology projects have transitioned to another investment. It can be a phase 3 investment that comes from somebody else within the agency. We actually count our CCRP and our phase 2E awards because it signals an external investor also putting money into external validation. And we use some of those proxy measures for uptick for the demand, the customer demand across the whole portfolio. With all of these situations, we lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. It's the same thing that you guys deal with. And so we have indicators of the overall portfolio health and the overall impact, but ours is not financial return the same way that y'all's would be, or a strategic investment. Ours have more to do with finding technologies that we need as a customer that actually do make a huge mission impact. So there's 6 technologies that were SBIR companies that are on the surface of Mars today on the Mars Curiosity rover. The Mars Curiosity rover, it's powered by an entrepreneurial small business. It's battery technology. The whole reason that it works is because of a small business, right? We also care a lot about the commercializations and the spin-offs and the technologies, how they've been spun off to other markets.
Very nice. You mentioned about university partnership. And I think that's something corporate VCs sometimes do, but they should probably do more. And actually the next interview in 2 weeks will be with someone who's coming from this. Stay tuned for when I'm allowed to reveal it. But could you give some tips or best practices about how to engage with universities so actually it's a win-win and not just you take advantage of them or it doesn't pan out?
Yeah, the beauty of the STTR program, Small Business Technology Transfer Program, is that it requires that collaboration between a university and a small business in the co-development and then commercialization of a technology. And it is again, devoted funding source. What's interesting is the types of things that we see coming out of STTR, they tend to be lower TRL. They tend to be earlier stage concepts because they're university derived, they're earlier research. But that collaboration between the two has created some really interesting and unique innovations. And one of the sequentials we actually just invested in, a $5 million investment, was in an STTR project with a firm called Protovations. Their partner is MIT, and they're developing traction control systems for lunar rovers. And that's software. So the software that they're developing for traction control is not just applicable to the lunar surface. It's really pulling some super innovative research out of university through this company into the market. I will say that there's definitely difficulty in those negotiation of rights agreements. That tends to be the things that we tell firms, don't wait on that. The negotiation of the intellectual property rights between the firm and the university is something that's going to take some time. And depending on the university, they might have standards. They're like, nope, we get 30%, we will take no less. Or and you're usually negotiating with a different part of the university than the PI it is that you want to work with. And they can create really wonderful opportunities to spin out really innovative technologies to the lab to the market.
Okay, it's great. And I think we will dive in the next interview about what you just said. But you're right, in any negotiation, you need to think about the other side. What do they need and why do they do it? Jenn, you were fantastic. We're at the top of the hour, but it was really nice. And I think it will help a lot of people to understand this really cool initiative and very meaningful.
Thank you to you for a great conversation and for hosting this series. We'll look forward to seeing the video.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.